Welcome to the SImple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 56th episode of the SImple Sophisticate. I am so excited for today's episode. It is something I've been wanting to do for a few months now, and schedules were able to coordinate and the planets aligned, as they say. Anyway, I am absolutely thrilled to bring to you today my interview with author and blogger Frances Schultz. We will be talking about life, about love, about decor, and most importantly, her new book, The Bee Cottage Story, How I Made a Muddle of Things and Decorated My Way Back to Happiness. Frances is someone who I have been admiring from afar, looking up to as a role model in many ways, with regards to her column that appeared in House Beautiful, which is how I first came to know her. And as I've gotten to know her more over the last few years, she is an inspiration to me in how she has lived and is living her life. And so I will stop gushing because I could go on forever. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. I'd like to welcome to the SImple Sophisticate author, blogger, former New York editor-at-large of Veranda magazine, and contributing editor to House Beautiful, Frances Schultz. I am beyond tickled to have the chance to chat. Thank you for joining me, Frances.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I first want to share some background with listeners because I have been a fan of yours since you first began the column in House Beautiful, covering your restoration of Bee Cottage. That was that regular monthly feature that just kind of, I'm a fan of cottages, first of all. I love that whole concept. And then I found out more about you. We started emailing, and I have been hooked ever since. And that column is precisely the inspiration for the book we are going to talk about today. Just released this past July, the book is already receiving rave reviews, and I'm here to give it another one. The Bee Cottage Story, How I Made a Muddle of Things and Decorated My Way Back to Happiness. And it was inspired by your series in House Beautiful, but it's also so much more than decor. And that's what I love about it. It's part memoir, part book. And let me just say, it's going to be a resource. It already has been, but it's going to be a resource that I continue to refer to often. How does it feel to finally have it done and out in readers' hands?
Well, I've done several books at this point as either author, co-author, ghost writer, contributor, etc. And it's wonderful to birth the baby, but when it finally does come out, you just remember how much trouble it is to get the darn thing out there and promote it and all that. You think, oh my goodness, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have it out. Thank you, and thank you for your kind words. And the fanship has been mutual, I hasten to add. But the response to the column, to the sort of personal aspect of the column, is what really spurred me on and inspired me to kind of continue to tell this story. And that's been what's been such a powerful response from readers to this book. I mean, people have appreciated the decorating and the pictures, the pretty pictures and all that. Although one review in Amazon did say, even though some of the decorating is not that good.
Well, I have to take. I disagree with that. I love your house, but that's what I love about this book. That's exactly what you were leading up to, is this idea. We really get to know you in this book, and I didn't expect that. I mean, I saw the title and I was like, okay, I just expected more, decor, but that's what I love the most about it, Frances. I mean, we really. You choose to be very vulnerable in this, and I think that's what's going to be very inspiring and is inspiring to so many readers. I know it was for me. Has that been overwhelming? Is that what you wanted? Was that the plan? My agents are the ones who talked me into
to doing this sort of memoir aspect, although people had sort of floated that idea to me before, just because I'm Southern and I tell funny stories, but they really, I mean, I just didn't think anybody wanted to hear about me or cared, but they really convinced me to do that and to sort of put myself out there. And so I did. And then once you go down that road, you're in it.
Yeah,
you're in it, and you're not really watching yourself from the outside. You're in it, and you're in the swim and the flow and all of that, and you're just doing it. And then once you do put it out there, you realize, wow, everybody who reads this book now knows that I have herpes.
Well, and you're so honest. That's the thing. Well, and I appreciate that. As a woman, I'm reading this as a woman who has been single for all of her adult life, and I'm saying that's the life I'm aspiring to live. And look, she's doing what I hope to do someday. And I wanted to know how you did it, and you really give us. It was just helpful. It was, and reassuring, if that's another word I want to use. It was very reassuring. I found myself losing my entire morning in your book when I finally found time to read it. And I was just like, why didn't I read this sooner? Because it was just like a deep breath. Thank you for that.
Well, if this little book gives that to you, then I'm so happy. That just fills me with joy and gratitude. On one level, there's that, here's a woman who was single like you. I was single for a really long time. Almost 30 years, 25 years, something like that. And to know that you can do that, and with all its missteps, by the way, whether you're married or single, you still goof up and you have disappointments and highs and lows and losses and gains and all of that. So there's nothing unique about being single in terms of, stumbling along life's journey, as it were.
True.
But if I may just share with you just a comment that someone emailed me, and I get things like this all the time, and this just makes my day.
Oh, please do.
But a woman said, I brought home your book from the library yesterday and sat down with my morning tea to start reading. You captured my attention from the beginning with the line, the desire to create a beautiful, harmonious environment was a place of clarity for me in an emotional morass, unquote. That was my line. And she said, for the first time I understood why, after losing my husband, I found such relief in redoing my kitchen. Many thought it was strange, but creating what I consider a lovely space has always been such a part of my life, and it got me through the first terrible months of grief. You stated it so well, and I thank you. And that just, I've read it 20 times, and it still gives me goosebumps. I have a lot of letters like that or similar to that. And, it's just the bigger message of the book is the healing power of doing something that you love, whatever it is. But in our case, yours and mine and hers, it is about creating a beautiful place to live and to be in. And of course, that's your whole blog. That's your whole deal.
Well, and that's what I love about the book is that you basically, this house is not just four walls. A house is not just four walls, just as that woman was saying. And one of the things that you say, I'm just going to quote you for a second. You had just come out of a long-term relationship with your then fiance. And that is also right when you had purchased, correct me if I'm wrong, you just purchased Bee Cottage in 2008.
That's right.
And you say, I love this quote because it's so honest, not being yourself does no one any favors, especially not you. By coming to an understanding of what was right for my house, I came to a better understanding of what was right for me, period. I believe this is universal, by the way. And the more conscious we are of how we shelter ourselves, both literally and figuratively, the more conscious we are of ourselves. And so I guess my question is, how can you kind of explain to listeners, how does a house teach us lessons about ourselves? How is that? How can it be so healing, as you shared with us, but with that one reader? How is that possible? How is it possible for you? What lessons did you learn?
To your point, and by the way, I think, this book speaks to those who are open to its message.
Yeah.
And, and it's not to say that this is universal. I mean, it doesn't apply to everyone, but it applies to those with whom its messages resonate. So I'm not trying to be all things to all people. But I mean, I don't think sort of Bill Gates is necessarily going to read this book and think, wow, that's my answer. You know, he probably really could live in a box and not care as long as he had computers and things like that. So you know, it's for the people who have the ears to hear it. You know, your home is the place that you begin and end each day. It's the place from which you go forth into the world and be who you are and fulfill your purpose and do what it is you do. And I think to be able to leave from there and come back to there and have this place be a place that reinforces and supports who you are and what you are. First of all, by being, I mean, why would you have 19th century etchings, for example, if you don't like them?
Right.
You know, why would you have super contemporary sculpture if you don't like it? So, you know, why would you have chintz curtains when what you really want is taupe burlap? So it's making those choices and deciding. I mean, it's so simple. Like, you know, it's just making those choices and deciding this makes me feel good. This doesn't. This appeals to me. You don't have to have a reason. Okay. You know, this is what I love. This is what appeals to me. This makes me happy when I look at it. And these things over here done it. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just what's right or wrong for you.
Well, and that's perfect. I'm glad you said that. And I think and I could be wrong. It's easy for you. It's easier for me. But how do they determine that? I mean, how do they determine? This is just for a guide for readers or listeners. How do they determine what's going to work best in this room? How do I go about choosing those pieces? So you're saying if they speak to you, if you find. I mean, what are some of your guidelines to help listeners pick items for room? I'm just curious because I love the pictures. I'm getting inspiration right now. I'm looking at your study, the study you have with a French daybed. I mean, it's like, how do you know to go find a French daybed, put it in a room, and it makes it? I mean, you and I may know, but how do readers know?
Well, you know, you start by just looking at a lot of things.
Okay.
And I mean, Pinterest and Instagram are a wealth of images. And of course, there are always the good old magazines and decorating books. And I think you start by looking and training your eye. You know, you unless you've had strawberry chocolate and vanilla, you don't know if you like chocolate more than strawberry. I mean, how would you know unless you tried both of them?
Good point. I like that.
You begin by just looking.
Okay.
At as much as you can look at. And I mean, definitely magazines, museums, art, all sorts of things. Just look and listen to, you know, we all have that little bell that goes off inside, or that instinctive response toward that which we like, that which pleases us, and that which, you know, leaves us And so you just have to listen to that, and you don't judge it. You don't say, well, wait, you know, people who are fashionable like super contemporary art. So I'm supposed to like super contemporary art if I want to appear sophisticated and fashionable. Well, you know what? No. If you want pink shag carpet and a mirror tile and a disco ball, and that's what blows your skirt up, then that's what you should have.
I love it. Well, and I think you kind of, from the get-go, you said this is my cottage, and I love that you've named this cottage from the beginning, Bee Cottage. Can you explain to readers how that name came about and why you chose it?
Well, it's a play on words. First of all, I love bees because bees are industrious, they're hardworking, they're organized, they have a queen, they're drawn to beauty, they're productive, they're creative, they are pollinators. Bees just do amazing things. So I love bees and nature and flowers. And the second part of that was just kind of a play on words. As people who read the book know, I had experienced a lot of loss in a fairly short period of time. The ending of I called off a marriage at the 11th hour. And prior to that, my mother had died, my father had died, my beloved uncle had died, and I had had cancer. And all this kind of happened in the space of about 5 years. And I just was kind of wrung out emotionally and to some degree physically. So I thought that this little house in this beautiful place in the world in Long Island could be a place where I could just be creative, be healed, be quiet, be social, be active, be be
Frances.
relaxed. Yeah, exactly. Just be. So it was sort of a play on words.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
But I'm a great believer in houses having names.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Well, I just think it gives them a personality. It gives them another sort of dimension. It's a reflection on, sometimes on the history of the house, on its owner, or on its creator or builder. I just think it's a nice thing.
I love that. I mean, the creator in me loves that idea because you also put your ownership on it too when you do that.
Right. Have you named your house, by the way?
Not yet. I'm still renting, and I will be the next house when I buy. I am kind of like you were saying. You're giving it a purpose and ownership, and I love it. That's a beautiful idea. I think.
But I think you can name it if you rent it. It's your home for the time being, so why not?
That's true. I will definitely contemplate that. That's a good point.
There you
go. Thank you for the suggestion.
You have an assignment now, Shannon.
That's true. Gosh, here we go. No, I will take that one on gladly. That one will be a fun one. You mentioned, and this is something I did not know about you. You and I have been emailing, I think, since 2012 sporadically, and I didn't realize that you are a breast cancer survivor. Mm-hmm. How has that experience changed how you go forward in life?
Well, I'm not one of those people who says cancer is a gift, and that sort of annoys me because it's not. It's the biggest pain in the ass, frankly. Pardon my French, but I was lucky. It was early and it was small, and girls, get your mammograms because that's how mine was discovered. But illness is a great teacher. It is a great teacher on many levels. We find out things about ourselves. We find out things about our loved ones. We find out things about our relationships and their durability that we might not otherwise, or that we might know instinctively or intuitively, but just might not acknowledge. So I embrace the silver lining of that experience for those reasons. But, you do find out kind of what you're made of.
Yeah.
In some ways, what your tolerance is, what your patience, and you have to be, having a busy life, and then on top of that, having to go to the deadgum doctor to do something every 5 minutes is just such a bother.
Yeah.
And being single in New York at the time, and I was working in television at the time. I was hosting a show called Southern Living Presents for then Turner South, a cable network. And I didn't really want people to know because as a freelancer, I never wanted it to be what my life was about. I have cancer. And, I really did keep it very quiet to my inner circle as much as I could. But I did not want to kind of compromise my image, if you will. The perception of my ability to do a job or get something done or show up or any of that. And it sort of didn't. But like I said, I was lucky and I'm resilient and I have the constitution of a horse. So that was my experience. And what I say to people who have to go to this same dreadful rodeo is that, you have to listen to your body and your instincts and your own intuition and handle it the way you feel is best for you.
Right. So, I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing that significantly. I think the younger women especially don't realize how we can still start being preemptive about this. We can still start checking it out, but it's never too late. So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
And you're demonstrating it right here in this interview, and I hope that readers and listeners are discovering why I am so drawn to you. But one of the constants that drew me in as a reader, and what I love most about your blog, by the way, go to her blog, francesschultz.com. I'll provide a link to that on today's show notes, readers and listeners. It's your honesty, your straightforwardness, your playful humor, and your fortitude. And when you describe the point in your life, and I'm on page 62 in the book, you describe a point in your life after you've just purchased the house, you're at the age of 50, and you write, quote, You'd think I'd have gotten by now the part about following your heart and about being true to yourself, but no. My truth was a blur. You might not have known it to look at me. Hell, I didn't know it myself, but I was a mess. I'd gone flat, and it seemed my life had gone flat too. And as I'm reading this, I read that line a couple times and I marked it in my book because I loved it. What came to mind when I read that was, in many ways, you were following your heart. You actually were, and it may not have been where you expect it to go, but you were being true to yourself, because ultimately everything led to Bee Cottage and the life you're living now with your husband. And so what were your thoughts? What are your thoughts now, I should say, upon reflection of this journey as you sat down to write this book?
Well, when I lecture about that lecture, when I give talks to groups about the book and everything, and I talk about my personal experiences in the first part of it, as I do in the book, I say, the truth, they say, will set you free. But, honey, it will wring your ass out first.
Okay, I like that.
And, in order to follow our hearts, we first have to know what is in our hearts. And that was part of my problem. I'm all for Joseph Campbell. Yes, follow your bliss and all that. But I don't know what that is. I didn't know what that was. So the first part of that is to keep asking the question. And, not to get all God squad on you, but I do think that when you ask the universe or God or whatever, or when you pray, I do think prayers are answered. And I do think if you ask for guidance, that it will come. It will come. You have to be willing to see it. You may or may not like what it is. It's not negotiable. I mean, the question needs to be clear and direct, and the answer is going to be clear and direct. It may not come in a form you expected it, but you will get an answer, and it's whether or not you want to see it or hear it. But that's really important. And even when you are following your heart, I mean, I'm complicated. I make things way more complicated than they are sometimes. And I have this sister who is so smart and beautiful and fantastic, but she has a kind of clarity about situations and people and things in her life that, no, that doesn't work for me. And she knows it right away. Or, yeah, that's great. I want that. And it may turn out to be wrong, or she may change her mind or whatever, but she has a kind of clarity that I just don't have. Mm-hmm. I think I'm gaining it as I get older. But, we have this notion that by the time you get to be a certain age, you need to have this incredible sort of transcendent self-awareness and self-understanding, and it just doesn't happen that way. And, even when you're following your heart, it doesn't mean you're not going to fall down and skin your knee really bad, a bunch of times even, possibly. And another thing we hear all the time is sort of universal wisdom is, as a sort of coping skill, is to do, as the Buddhists say, to, be in the moment. Be present and be in the moment. But I've had to say this to a few of my friends lately. You know what? They were going through tough things. I say, everybody says be in the moment, but sometimes the moment sucks. and that's where you are. Yeah. And what we know for sure is that it's going to pass. Yeah. But sometimes it just is an icky place. Yeah. And the less you fight that, if you just can be with that and not fight it, then it will pass. Kind of like a wave that you ride, and it does pass.
I think it's nice for people to hear it. I think we get so bombarded. I love it. Thank you for sharing that, because we get I appreciate it, because we get so bombarded with this idea of happiness, and I love being happy. Don't get me wrong, but we have to be happy every single minute of every single day, and if we don't, we've done something wrong. But I think that's exactly what you convey in this book, because if they follow your blog and they listen to see your Instagram, you live a full life, and we don't need to know all the details of everyone's life, but we need to know that it's not always this perfect.
Right.
And so I appreciate the honesty of all the peaks and valleys, because you really go there. You go to both those places, and you end up pretty well. How are you feeling these days? Life just sounds like it's going very well.
Well, it's good. It's very full, as you said. But just to go back to what you said a minute about, there is this kind of incredible pressure on us as a culture, I think, or there's an aspect of our culture that pressures us to be happy, and whatever that means, and what does it mean anyway. I don't. I say in the book, in the epilogue, where I do have a happy ending, but who knows? We don't know. We don't know what tomorrow brings. It could all go down in a minute, but right now it's wonderful. But I say in the book something like, it's not as so happiness is an egg that hatches, when you find the right nest. And then there you are, a little hatched egg of happiness. It's
ongoing.
It is, yeah. And it's a ride. Yeah. But I think that, and I've begun to think about this more and more. But what I do feel almost constantly, and what I do practice, I have a daily meditation practice. Oh. I've had it since I was 20 years old. Oh. And what I do think is important to practice is gratitude. And that is a kind of mental discipline, and it is a practice, if you will. And that, I find, is very powerfully cumulative.
As you can see with my discussion with Frances Schultz, we've talked about so much. We've talked about life, we've talked about happiness, and we've barely touched on the actual decor part of her book. But her book truly does intertwine into her life, and it is very much a memoir as she figures out how she's going to decorate and reform her 1920 stucco East Hampton cottage called Bee Cottage. There is much more to come. We're going to talk about meditation, we're going to talk about authenticity, and we begin to talk about that lovely garden that adorns the exterior of Bee Cottage, making it the respite of comfort, beauty, and easy living. Stay tuned. I'm going to take a quick 1-minute intermission, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to my interview with blogger and author of the Bee Cottage Story, Frances Schultz. We're going to jump right back in where I ask her a question about meditation. And I have to, and so that like, as you said, it comes with practice and awareness. And I'm going to have to ask you really quickly, because I talk about this a lot on the blog, meditation. It's a powerful tool. You said you've been doing it a long time. Can you elaborate or maybe give some tips for someone or people who are contemplating it but find it to be difficult? Or, I mean, I read, Dan Harris's book, 10% Happier, loved it, found it very helpful, very simple. Uh-huh. And I'm doing my 5 to 10 minutes every day. So I'm curious what advice or tips you could give that have worked for you, because it clearly has helped and gone into all arenas of your life. It's not just when you sit down and do that. It's now infiltrated everything, which is the point. Yeah. So I'm curious, if you don't mind, I would love to hear for my own purposes.
I'm nodding my head vigorously.
Okay.
Well, I started I took a course in transcendental meditation when I was in college.
Okay.
And I practiced that for a time. And then honestly, I was sort of in and out of that for over the years. But I would, when I was having a rough time, I would resume the practice. So I won't say that I was this sort of model meditator, citizen for all that time, but it was always there for me. It's a tool. It's just a tool. And TM was a very good technique for me. Later on, in the early 2000s, I worked with and this is also in the book. But anyway, I began to work with a teacher who taught Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist practices and teachings. And so I learned that, and that was a major commitment and took a lot of time and took a lot of effort. And I did that for a while, and then I finally sort of agreed to disagree with her, and I'll do anyway. I've done a lot of different things in the meditation department, but what we all have to end up with a practice that works for us that we can do. And so what I do today is a combination of TM and sometimes, Shannon, like you, sometimes it's 5 or 10 minutes in the morning.
Okay.
But it is without fail. The important thing, the key word here is practice.
Okay.
And a regular practice. But it doesn't have to be, 45 minutes twice a day, which is what some schools of meditation teach. And again, we have to do what works for you. Somebody recently told me about, and I read it, and I loved it, a book by, and I can't remember the author's name, but the title is Madly Chasing Peace.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
This was a young woman. It's very short. I mean, it's like a half an inch thick. And this is a young woman who was suicidal, and she was alcoholic, and anyway, she had all these problems. Anyway, what she eventually found that worked for her was 3 minutes, 3 times a day.
Okay.
And she outlines a very clear, simple little program in her book. And it was incredibly powerful for her and effective. And, a monkey can sit down for 3 minutes. So you have to find, and there's so many resources online, blah, 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 but you just have to find something that works for you. And if you sit in a chair and for 5 minutes in the morning and just breathe in and out, that's going to change your life.
I think that's great. I mean, right there, start there and practice and just being mindful. And I thank you for sharing this.
Well, and if I can say one more thing, people think I have to quiet my mind. It's so hard to quiet my mind. Nobody can quiet our mind.
Thank you for saying that. I think we need to hear that.
If you sit there and you breathe in and you breathe out, and if you can just sort of picture your thoughts as a stream, and all you do is kind of step on the bank and just watch the thoughts go by. You don't have to engage in the thoughts.
I think that was my big aha. Finally, this last year, it was like, okay, Shannon, you're not going to stop your thoughts, because that's when I basically had given up. I was like, I can't stop thinking.
No, it's impossible.
Yeah. So as soon as I realized, just think, when you're thinking something, just say, okay, I'm thinking about how my day went. At least you're observing it. That's huge. That was a huge aha for me.
And you return to your breath. Breathing is meditation.
There you go. Thank you. I think that just helped. I think that will help a lot of people. I know that.
Meditate at a stoplight.
Okay. Yeah. That's true. You could do that. That's a good point.
Just come back. The yogis say, come back to your breath.
Okay. Oh, I love it. Thank you, Frances. Honestly, I really appreciate you sharing that. Okay, I know I have a few people that are probably wondering, well, get to the decor, Shannon, get to the decor. So I have a few questions, and here's one, and this since we are in summer, and I love your yard of Bee Cottage. It is absolutely stunning. The lap pool and the front is just, the entry just screams cottage. And I'm just like, oh, I want to live there. Oh, I want to go out and have dinner with your dinner parties underneath the pergola. I mean, it's just brilliant. What were you most surprised about when you were bringing this yard to what it is today? What was the most surprising or most enjoyable thing about making the yard what it is?
Well, first of all, let me say I have a lot of help with my garden. And Jane Lappin, Wainscot Gardens in East Hampton, designed it, and I get a lot of help. I really am not an expert gardener, far from it, and I just don't have the time right now. But so if you're working with someone who can, if you want to do just the lazy way, which is usually my way, go to a nursery and say, okay, I want something blooming from here to here. And, what's a good selection of plants for my area and my kind of soil, and where would I start, and things that are, start with things that are easy. And if you just speak to a knowledgeable nurseryman or someone at a garden store, you can learn a lot that way. I love, and I think having green in your garden, having structure, whether it's with plants or actual structures, is very effective in a garden. And just green is pretty. Just green and shapes and different textures of greenery can be so beautiful, and you can just punctuate those sometimes with annuals and then work in perennials. Perennials that grow, that are healthy and that grow, sooner or later need to be tamed and divided or cut back or taken out or something like that. But
I like the idea of accessorizing the shrubs or the greenery. That's a great way of looking at it. Keep your perennials or your trees and then just accentuate them with those yearly annuals. That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So your yard has all sorts of little nooks and places to go relax. What is your favorite place in your yard?
Probably the terrace on the back under the pergola. It's just you can sit there and sort of take in the whole space, which is not very big. I mean, it's a third of an acre, the whole lot. So the little garden with the lap pool and all that is not very big, but it's nice to be able to sit in that space and take the whole thing in, and then still be close enough to the house to run in for a iced tea refill.
I love that. No, and I've really enjoyed your pictures on Instagram of the dinner parties that they're just beautiful. Your centerpieces. I have one last question that I'd like to get to. The main theme that grabbed me throughout the entire book is that, and you address this in your final chapter, which you briefly talked about a little while ago, is authenticity. And I have two questions. Why do you think being authentic is so hard, and perhaps specifically for women, because that's what you and I are experiencing the world as? And then second, what have you found to be helpful when it comes to being authentic?
Well, I think it's hard, first of all, because particularly for women, because so much is expected of us. We're expected to be mothers, wives, girlfriends, best friends, wardrobe consultants, makeup experts, hairdressers. We're so many expectations that we often feel pulled in many different directions, and it's hard to get a sort of a consistent definition of what's authentic for us is. But I think the answer to that is a lot of things are. Yes, we are mothers and wives and girlfriends and wardrobe consultants and decorators, and so I think that's why it's difficult. And so, what was the second part of your question?
What have you found to be helpful when it comes to being that authentic you, authentic Frances?
Well, I can bring it back to the book and to decorating, and figuring out what I really like, what I want to live with in terms of color and fabric, and it changes, color and fabric and objects and design, and just listening to myself and how I respond to that, how it makes me feel, how I respond to it. And this is not any profound philosophical insight. This is just real simple. I like cherry. I like blackberry. I like, vanilla. I like strawberry. It's easy.
We just have to pay attention to ourselves more often.
Pay attention, and you don't second guess yourself.
Oh, there you go.
You don't second guess yourself. The answers are short and clear, and you just have to be willing to listen. And the other thing I was going to say was, about authenticity is if you get what you love, if you only acquire or buy what you love, it all goes together somehow.
I'm going to stop us right there. That's a perfect way to end. Short and simple. Go pick this book up, you guys. The Bee Cottage. It's, like we said, a lot of decor inspiration that we didn't have time to get to, but it's full of the resource you're looking for. But it's so much more than that, and I know you're going to love it.
Thank you so much, Shannon. That was great.
I want to again thank Frances Schultz for joining me on today's episode of the SImple Sophisticate. You can get your very own signed copy of Frances Schultz's book, The Bee Cottage Story, How I Made a Muddle of Things and Decorated My Way Back to Happiness, by visiting her blog, francesschultz.com. I'll provide a link on today's show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast56. For this week's Petit Plaisir. Since we ran out of time to talk about all the decor inspiration, tips, and ideas that fill her book, I'm going to share with you my top 10 from the book. So stay tuned. One of the beautiful things about Frances Schultz's book, The Bee Cottage Story, is that she not only gives you these tips and advice on what to do, but she shows how she did them with images, the before and after images. Let's get to my list of top 10 decor tips and ideas found within the pages. Number 1, first decide how you will live in the house. List your day-to-day habits. How do you move through the rooms? How are you going to use them? Keep a log of your activities to make sure you are aware of them, and then plan your space around what you really do. I love that one. Number 2, choose crown molding and wainscoting to enhance a room's dimension. Brilliant idea, and it really does change the room immediately. Number 3, turn a random object into a light fixture. A bird cage, perhaps? Frances has a fantastic picture of her dining room and the bird cage she uses as her chandelier. Number 4, rooms shouldn't be static, she states. One of the ways to keep them lively is to change the art and objects displayed in them, however simple or modest. Number 5, keep a collection that is sentimental to you. One of the collections that Frances includes in her book, there are many that I love, is her collection of sand from around the world of places she has visited. She just keeps each of them in their own specific glass jars. It's so simple. It's a great idea, and what a great conversation starter. Number 6, allow baskets and pots to hang as decor in kitchens or pantries to provide texture and warmth. Simply hang them from a metal rod used for curtains with an S-hook. I provide an image of her kitchen in today's show notes where she actually has a whole row of baskets. This is a great idea, she suggests, when you have limited space in your kitchen. Number 7, install pull-out shelves in your lower cabinets. In Frances's words, it will be life-changing. Number 8, have hand soap and hand cream by the sink in the kitchen. Frances recommends L'Occitane products for quality and packaging. Number 9, rooms are puzzles, she admits. If you have a lot of pieces that just don't fit, just let them float around in the room for a while and don't think about it. Sometimes you'll return and you'll see that a piece fits and it will all come together. And number 10, the last one, the big one, the one that really captured my attention immediately. Design your house in a way that supports and validates who you are and what you do. My top 10 list pulled from the pages of The Bee Cottage Story will be on today's show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 56. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast where I'll recommend a book, a film, a recipe, or from time to time, introduce you to an expert who offers insight into how to live simply luxuriously. Anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Are you a new listener to the SImple Sophisticate? Curious about what living simply luxuriously is all about? Start at the beginning with the very first episode that focuses on the 8 pillars of living a simply luxurious life. It's the most downloaded episode of the podcast and the perfect way to discover how to live your best life. Visit www.thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast1 and discover what simply luxurious living is all about.